Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to meeting number 25 of the Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs and International Development.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Jennis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to raise a point of order regarding the scheduling for this committee. And just to say at the outset about it, I'm very, very disappointed by what we're seeing. This is an important issue, and I hope we could proceed in a collaborative way. The committee held a meeting on July 15th and agreed to summer hearings. The committee wished to hear from ministers before July 22nd. That didn't happen. The committee met once on August 4th. It has now been over a month since the committee has met. But in the particular context of this meeting, we had received a notice for a 3-hour meeting to hear from witnesses according to a schedule. Members had made plans, prepared questions, provided your office with rounds of questions to be asked. And you, by all indication, unilaterally changed that agenda, shortened the meeting with less than an hour to go prior to the beginning of the meeting. That will now, if you proceed with this plan, significantly limit our ability to engage with important experts in accordance with the notice that was provided to the committee. We had also been requesting that there be some time for committee business so that we can actually discuss the committee's agenda. You have shortened the committee's agenda, but you have provided no additional opportunity for committee business to talk about the foregoing agenda to try to reach some kind of consensus. Of course, in cases where consensus had been reached in the past, such as having summer hearings, those weren't honored by your office. So it's very, very frustrating and disappointing to see a chair operating with respect to the schedule in the manner that you have, Mr. Chair. So I'm disappointed, I'm frustrated, and certainly this is not what the committee has seen in the past from Mr. Spangeman or Mr. Levitt, other chairs who were able to set aside their partisan affiliation and deal respectfully with all members in terms of the agenda. I wonder if you can provide an explanation as to your conduct, Mr. Chair, why you have not allowed the committee to meet for over a month and why you suddenly shortened this meeting with an hour's notice, less than an hour's notice to members, why you're behaving in such a fashion, and whether you think this is an appropriate or respectful way for a chair to operate. And if you would consider appeals from the committee to go back to the agenda that was originally proposed, which is a 3-hour meeting where we can hear from 3 hours of witnesses, and perhaps also set aside some time for committee business in the near future so that we can agree on an agenda and move forward. Thank you.
Mr. Jennis, thank you for your comments. First of all, you have raised a number of different issues, but I can assure you that in consultation with the clerk and with other members, we have tried our utmost to ensure that these committee hearings do proceed. The reason why it was delayed initially was that, as you will recall, members indicated that they wanted to hear from 9 members over the course of 3 hours. Unfortunately, despite the efforts of the clerk and other members, only 3 people actually made themselves available several weeks ago. So it was decided that it was best to actually not proceed at that time and to redouble of our efforts to have the opportunity to hear from as many witnesses as possible. Now, that was one reason. Another reason, as you're fully aware, Mr. Jennis, is that Parliament had a network maintenance week, which meant that no committee had access to virtual meetings. Despite that, as soon as that was over, we again endeavored to invite as many witnesses that the committee members wanted to hear from. But again, as you know full well, unfortunately, quite a few of those witnesses indicated that they were not available. So several hours ago, on advice of the clerk, who had actually spoken to various members, it was agreed that given that there were only 4 witnesses appearing before us today, that we have 2 panels, which is generally in the regular course of business. But if you like, after this meeting is over, I'd be more than happy to contact you and provide you with any information that may be of interest to you, Mr. Jennings.
Mr. Chair, on the point of order, I maybe Mr. Bergeron first, and then, but I would like to be able to clarify my point of order because I don't think it's been addressed. But Mr. Bergeron, welcome to go ahead with me.
Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll try to be brief. I simply want to point out, Mr. Chair, that although I view Mr. Jennis's concerns as being absolutely legitimate, I think it would be inappropriate to assume anyone acting in bad faith from the start of the meeting. Let me explain. When the last meeting was cancelled, it was unfortunately because of the fact that given the very short timelines, only 3 witnesses were able to confirm. And because we wanted 3 hours of discussions with 9 witnesses, I felt it was a good idea to give ourselves an opportunity with a little bit of notice to hold our 3 meetings with 9 witnesses. The fact is that despite the notice, it turns out that it is not possible to get more than 4 witnesses today. It seems to me that it would be inappropriate to spend 3 hours for 4 witnesses, whereas initially we had expected to have 9 witnesses over 3 hours. I think the chair has respected the wish of members of this committee, which is that we wanted to hear from the Ukrainian Congress, Canadian-Ukrainian Congress, and on its own for an hour, and then to hear from the second panel of witnesses. Now, the issue of the 3rd hour, would it have been a good idea to take advantage of this 3rd hour to have this working session on future business, as had been mentioned by members of the committee earlier? I think that's a legitimate question. That being said, perhaps it was also wise to let the dust settle to some degree once we've heard from witnesses in order to be able to really take the right approach as to our future plans. I certainly would like it that if we do have a future business meeting, that happen as soon as possible. I think today, as a 3rd hour, it would perhaps have been a bit tight, given the fact that we do need to think about, reflect on the information we will have been hearing from the witnesses. That being said, I believe that the questions asked by Mr. Genuis are legitimate. However, I believe the clerk and the chair in the circumstances acted quite appropriately with the best possible intentions. So I support the decision made by the chair. That is to reorganize our work, a decision that wasn't taken unilaterally, but in consultation with other members, myself being one. This decision to shorten today's meeting so as to consolidate our panels and make sure that they be as interesting as possible. And that is what I wanted to add, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
So Mr. Chair, on the point of order, first of all, it's being said a number of times that you conducted consultations with other members. I don't doubt that you conducted consultations with some other members, but I think it would be useful if you told the committee which members from which parties you consulted. I certainly know that no Conservative members were consulted about the last-minute change made to the schedule this morning for example.
Point of order.
I'm
Mr. Chair.
raising a point of order. So
this is not a point of order. This is debate.
No, it is a point of order.
Precious 2 hours, which is now 1 hour and 45 minutes to hear our witnesses.
We have 3 hours,
as a Liberal member, would love to engage with the witnesses. We're all here convened to actually have testimony, have questions and answers. You're eating into the time for those witnesses to actually testify and for us to have a meaningful meeting right now. So I hope this is not an attempt to filibuster a meeting on this very important issue, which we all want to get to.
Thank you, Mr.
So may I resume my point of order, Mr. Chair? Thank you.
As was indicated, Mr. Genesis, it's not a point of order. You have asked questions. I have responded to those questions. Mr. Bergeron has kindly weighed in and clarified the issues that you have raised as well. But should you like, after this meeting is over, after we have heard from all the witnesses, I would be more than happy to make myself available and assure you that I did undertake consultations with members from all parties.
Mr. Chair, I have a point of order to raise, and I hope you'll respect my right as a committee member to raise those points. And I will be brief. Since we have a 3-hour time slot available, I think we can certainly accommodate the concerns of Mr. Zubari, since we have a 3-hour time slot set aside. My comments briefly are this. Mr. Chair, you said you consulted with other members. Which members did you consult with before making the last minute change to the schedule? You said there's a 1-week network outage, but we had 6 weeks since the July 15th meeting. And you seem to be uniquely, compared to your predecessors, unable to schedule witnesses or find times when they are available. I don't want to presume bad faith, but that is concerning. Other previous chairs didn't, on sensitive subjects, suddenly find themselves unable to schedule times which worked for the witnesses. And again, I want to ask, would you set aside time at the end of this meeting for committee business, given that we have a 3-hour time slot?
Mr. Janice, allow me to just simply say, you're saying that you're not presuming bad faith. You actually are presuming bad faith. We have endeavored.
I think you've shown a lot of bad faith, Mr. Chair. I do. I honestly do. Respectfully.
Well, you're entitled to your opinion, but
your first act as chair was to rule out of order a motion that your predecessor had ruled in order, and we were already debating.
Engaging in debate, and I would ask that you extend some courtesy to the witnesses that are making themselves available today. So we can discuss this later, and I can assure you that everything has been in order, that the clerk
it hasn't.
It has been very much in order.
No, it hasn't.
Mr. Jennings,
I'm happy to proceed, but Mr. Chair, this is not helpful to you, but I look forward to hearing from the witnesses. Thank you.
Thank you. So if we may now resume the meeting, I'd like to welcome all the members to meeting number 25 of the Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs and International Development. Pursuant to the motion adopted on July 15th, 2022, the committee is meeting on its study of the export of Russian Gazprom turbines. Comme d'habitude, de services.
As usual, interpretation services are available.
Pour cette réunion, en cliquant sur l'icône globe au bas de votre.
You can click on the globe icon at the bottom of your screen.
I would like to take this opportunity to remind all participants that screenshots or taking photos of your screen are not permitted. Before speaking, I would ask that you wait until I recognize you by name. When speaking, please speak slowly and clearly. When you are not speaking, your mic should be on mute. A reminder that all comments by members and witnesses should be addressed through the chair. And before I welcome our witnesses today, I'd also like to welcome a new clerk that has been assigned to our committee. We are very, very fortunate to have with us today a new clerk who has indicated that she will be here as soon as Parliament resumes. And she has made quite a few efforts to make today's committee hearing possible. So thank you for that. Now, I'd like to welcome our first panel for the day, which are two witnesses we will be hearing from the Ukrainian Canadian Congress. We're truly privileged to have with us today Mr. Ihor Michalchyshin, the Executive Director and Chief Executive Officer of the Ukrainian-Canadian Congress, and also Mr. Orest Zakidalski, who's the Senior Policy Advisor with the Ukrainian-Canadian Congress. Now, I would like to remind the two witnesses that you each have 5 minutes for your opening remarks, after which the members will have the opportunity for the remainder of the hour to ask you questions. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will be providing opening remarks, and then we'll be happy to move to questions. So, on behalf of the Ukrainian Canadian Congress, it's a pleasure to be here to have the invitation to appear before you today. Alexandra Hichi, our president, spoke with you several weeks ago, and we're here to continue with sharing the views of the Congress. I hope that members of the committee have had a good summer. We've certainly been in touch with many of you and appreciate the work that you've been doing over the summer as well. I also wanted to, since it's September 7th, wish you a happy Ukrainian Canadian Heritage Day. It's 130 years that Ukrainian Canadians have been here in Canada, and it's a recognized day in several provinces, and we're working to recognize that nationally. So just wanted to note that for the record. So to today's topics, on June 15th, the UCC had written to Foreign Minister Melanie Joly expressing our concern with the Canadian government considering waiving of sanctions. On July 6th, we wrote to Prime Minister Trudeau and we stated about this turbine matter that this would be a test of the resolve of the government of Canada to maintain sanctions and to continue to isolate Russia. Our feeling was that any waiver of Canadian sanctions would be viewed as capitulation to Russian blackmail and demands and energy terrorism, serving to embolden the Russian terrorist state with far-reaching and negative consequences, not only for Ukraine or the European Union, and the waiver was granted. We've seen that the Russian government has predictably been very emboldened in demanding further concessions. Despite Canada and Germany's capitulation to the Russian demand, Russia has in fact shut off Nord Stream 1 pipelines entirely. No gas is flowing currently, and there's a continuation of escalation of stories about the reasons why the Russian gas supply isn't working this particular week or that particular week. The Kremlin spokesperson Peskov said on September 5th that Russian gas supplies will not resume until Western sanctions are lifted, using the false pretext that sanctions are preventing the servicing of Russian pipelines. This, of course, is not factual, but that is not the point. The Kremlin lies brazenly and as a matter of regular policy. What does matter is that as we've said many times, the turbine issue here has never have been about the turbines, it's about sanctions. And now Canada and Germany continue to have a choice whether to continue to play this game with Russian blackmail and demands, or whether to simply cancel the sanctions exemption and show Russia that we will not be intimidated in the face of their threats. We understand that the Russian regime responds to strength. The UCC believes it's overdue time for Canada and our allies to show this strength in the face of increasing Russian aggression and pressure. So we call on the committee to do the following. First, to urge the government of Canada to revoke the permits issued on July 9th, 2022 by the Minister of Foreign Affairs, which allows for the repair and transport of 6 Siemens Nord Stream 1 turbines over a period of 2 years to the Russian state gas monopoly Gazprom. Second, to support the designation of the Russian Federation as a state sponsor of terrorism. Third, to support the expulsion from Canada of the ambassador of the Russian Federation and the Russian diplomatic mission. Fourth, support the suspension of issuing of travel visas by Canada to all citizens of the Russian Federation. Finally, and most importantly, we believe the tide of Russia's genocidal war against Ukraine is being turned on the battlefield by the Ukrainian people's heroic defense of their country. We know that the government of Canada can continue to play a leadership role in ensuring that the Ukrainian people have the equipment, weapons, and means with which to finish the fight and ensure the victory of freedom over tyranny. $500 million was allocated in budget 2022 for military and security support to Ukraine. And we know that these funds have been spent and exhausted. So we urge this committee to support us in reviewing the ways that Canada can substantially increase our military assistance to Ukraine going forward. We look forward to your questions and discussing Canada's support for Ukraine. And I would also note that the committee may wish to consider in the future a working visit to Ukraine, as we've seen legislators from many countries visit Kyiv, visit Ukraine to talk to their Ukrainian counterparts and get a sense of the matters on the ground. So with that, I'll close my remarks and we're open to questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Michalczyszyn. We now will hear from Mr. Zakidowski, please. 5 minutes, sir.
I actually don't. Excuse me. I actually don't have opening remarks, so we're more than ready and welcome any questions from the members of the committee.
Thank you very much for that. Now we will start off our round of questioning. The first round will consist of 6 minutes of questions, and the first member to proceed will be Mr. Jennis. Mr. Jennis, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and it's great to see the Ukrainian-Canadian Congress back after so long. I have a couple questions about other matters related to Ukraine before we get to turbines. My first question is, to your knowledge, is there a fully operational Canadian embassy in Kyiv right now?
Sure, I can answer what we know publicly. We know that the Prime Minister and Minister Joly and Minister Freeland were there in Kyiv on May 8th to do a ceremony opening the embassy. And we do know that Ambassador Galadza is in Kyiv and working, but media coverage that we've seen notes that services at the embassy are still suspended due to the security situation, and that other people have been directed to other physical locations across Ukraine or Europe for visa assistance. So that's what we're aware of.
Okay, thank you very much. That's important information. Secondly, Canada has been behind our allies in imposing consequences on Russian diplomats. Are you satisfied with the approach that the government of Canada has taken on this? And why hasn't the government, in your view, why has the government not been more aggressive in this front?
I'll let my colleague respond to that one.
In our view, I mean, I'm not sure why the government hasn't responded to those calls. I mean, we've seen several countries in Europe expel numerous Russian diplomats. We've not seen Canada expel any Russian diplomats since February. Added to that, there was a fairly disturbing incident here in Ottawa at the embassy wherein and this was reported publicly, what appeared to be a Russian diplomatic car. People got out of it and vandalized it was a blue and yellow painted bike that was placed outside the embassy on public property that was spray painted and destroyed by what certainly appeared to be people that emerged from a car that was later seen on the property of the Russian embassy. This was in about a month ago. There has not been any response to this that I have knowledge of. And so, you know, it is our position that the Russian embassy is a security threat to Canadians, and that our government should be forceful in responding to that threat.
Thank you. It's fair to say you're disappointed with the lack of response from the government so far?
I would say that's fair to say, yes.
Okay. With respect to the turbine issue, we've seen 3 explanations from the government on this, 3 different explanations. First, they said it was about German energy security. That turned out not to be true. Then they said it was about calling Putin's bluff. That, of course, doesn't make any sense in light of new events that the government continues to plan to export turbines in spite of the fact that gas has been cut off anyways. But we saw a third explanation from the Minister of Foreign Affairs in court filings in response to the Ukrainian World Congress. And in that explanation, the government was essentially showing This decision was about trying to protect jobs in Montreal, speaking about jobs at a Siemens facility that is in fact relatively close to Minister Jolie's own riding, which raises questions about whether the government was trying to take into consideration constituency politics in granting sanctions waiver. What was your reaction to the information in those filings that the minister was taking into consideration jobs close to home in the decision to grant this waiver?
So the UCC isn't part of the court filings process. So this is new information for me as well. But I mean, as you mentioned, we've certainly seen a number of attempts to explain this, what we think is a poor decision. We keep offering our views on the opportunity to correct the situation. During the German Chancellor's visit, we thought that was a ideal opportunity for both countries to, with Ukrainian support, make amends and make some clarity on the situation. So the documents you reported on have not been reported publicly. I've never heard any situation of Siemens responding to sort of going out of business if they don't have this particular contract. They're a large multinational company with many processes underway, I'm sure. But I'll let the documents speak for themselves, obviously, in court in terms of how the government is responding.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And just related to questions of Siemens' relationship to the government and these considerations, we did a search of the lobby registry and found that on April 13th of this year, representatives from Siemens met with David Morrison, the Deputy Minister for Foreign Trade and Global Affairs Canada, and John Hannaford, another Deputy Minister. Do you have any indication as to what Siemens was discussing when they were lobbying the government back in April, and how lobbying by Siemens might have played a role in this decision that is very much contrary to Ukraine's interest, but might be in Siemens' own commercial interest?
You have 30 seconds, please.
Obviously, I haven't seen those documents. Siemens has not met with us, and they have a lot of interests in Russia and other places that I'm sure they're trying to understand the government's approach on. Okay.
I just maybe make a comment for the benefit of this committee that it would be useful to hear from Siemens at some point if the chair is able to find time to schedule them. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We next go to Mr. Zuberi. Mr. Zuberi, you have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here, to the Ukrainian Canadian Congress for all of your advocacy. As we all know, we in Canada are steadfast with the Ukrainian people. In your opening remarks, you mentioned a number of points, one of which was that you are advocating for Russia to be added to a list of state-sponsor terrors. In 2017, Mr. Zyditsky, you also made testimony saying that the same point that Russian Federation should be added to the state sponsor terror list, or a state sponsor of terror, I should say. At the end, President Biden decided recently, I should say, to not designate Russia in this way. What do you make of Biden's decision to not do that?
I would say that that is a decision that we hope the president will review and take another look at. In the U.S. Congress, there is wide support for this designation. A Senate resolution passed unanimously. Now, I mean, we all know our friends down south, and the U.S. Senate doesn't pass anything unanimously. But this passed unanimously. This was a resolution introduced by Senator Graham and Senator Blumenthal, calling on the administration to, in fact, designate Russia a state sponsor of terrorism. We know also that Speaker of the House, Ms. Pelosi, is a strong supporter of this position. She is, of course, from the president's party. And so we do hope that both the Senate and the House will encourage the president to revisit that decision. And certainly we look to you to encourage both American legislators and in your interactions with the U.S. administration to also encourage the United States and us together to list Russia as a state. In the U.S. it's called state sponsor. Here it's called state supporter of terrorism. The designation means the same thing. And certainly this is long overdue. I mean, the shooting down of flight MH17 was in July 2014, and certainly a country that shoots down civilian airliners is engaging in terrorism.
So I wanted to switch gears for a moment and talk about the German ambassador's testimony recently in August around the disinformation war that is being waged by Russia. And I think that we all can agree that that is what Russia does. And with respect to the turbines, we know that Russia has put forth that it's because of sanctions that gas and oil cannot be delivered to Germany. We proved at the end that that's not the case, that the turbine that Russia said was needed to be utilized so that energy could flow to Germany, that it was not the case that this turbine in question was absolutely essential for that. Russia is now refusing to actually utilize this turbine. Do you think that there would have been you think that the disinformation war would have been amped up by Russia if Germany did not have this turbine in hand?
I don't know what Russia would have done if we hadn't waived the sanctions on Russia. I presume that had we not waived the sanctions on Russia, Russia also would not be delivering gas to Germany. And so we're at the same place we were, except that we've waived sanctions on Russia. So we've gained nothing, but lost sanctions that we had on Russia. So I think that that's the problem, that we, by having undertaken this capitulation, have done nothing except placate Russia. And obviously, as we can see, the return is further Russian obstinance and further Russian pressure, which is what we said would happen at when the government took this decision, and in trying to convince the government not to take.
Would you agree that we've taken arguments away from Russia in terms of the disinformation war?
Well, I mean, they can make up whatever they want. So, I mean, if the point is to take away arguments from the Russian disinformation war, then I don't want to know where that ends, because they're just going to make more stuff up. So,
thank you.
I honestly don't really understand the reasoning.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Zuberi. We now go to Mr. Bergeron. Mr. Bergeron, you have 6 minutes.
Merci, monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. Your testimony is extremely relevant given the committee's work. During the session, when we heard from Ministers Wilkinson and Joly, I asked a question. What would be the grounds? Because we really did make an effort to make sure that this exemption be revocable. And at that point, I asked what would be the grounds for revoking this exemption. And unfortunately, for reasons of time, the Minister Joly did not have time to answer the question. But I would like to address this question with you. Minister Wilkinson, in an interview on Radio-Canada, said that Russia's game has been made obvious, but he still hopes that the turbine will return to Gazprom and be serviceable, used. The Minister of Foreign Affairs said to CBC News that she did not intend to change her decision despite Gazprom's decision not to allow that first turbine in. Now that this Russian game has been disclosed, what would be the relevance of maintaining this sanction, this exemption?
Thank you, Mr. Bergeron. I have to say I agree with you in your question that it is unclear several weeks, months later why there would be no revocation of this waiver as the Russian weaponization of energy has become emboldened, more dramatic, I would say, day by day, despite the efforts of the Germans to go along with the various conditions and demands and deadlines that were being imposed initially, such as the turbine and other matters. So I agree with you that it is not clear why we would continue to allow this waiver to be extended, which allows 2 more years of Gazprom making profits, which we know ultimately fuel the Russian ability to fund the war against Ukraine, a war which we all hope will be wrapped up with a Ukrainian victory in the near future, as opposed to being financed and fueled, literally fueled for, we hope not, years to come.
Avant même que la décision.
Before the decision was even made by the Canadian government, some were saying that they had doubts as to the relevance of revoking these sanctions. Some people believe that Russia has reserve turbines, and even Siemens is of the view that the pipeline can work despite these turbines not being online. But these statements from August 21st and 24th from these ministers are previous to Dmitry Peskov's statement from September 5th, stating that supply will only resume once sanctions are lifted. So clearly, it's quite obvious that this is just pure blackmail on the part of Russia, and it would be worthwhile to revoke these exemptions, specifically given the fact that the scenario of revoking it was raised by the ambassador for Germany when she appeared before this very committee. So I just can't wrap my mind around this. Of course, there have been no new statements from either minister since Mr. Peskov's statement dated September 5th. But I simply can't understand why we would maintain this exemption, whereas this Russian blackmail is just been made clearly obvious. If you'll allow me, gentlemen, when you appeared, last time you appeared, or the Canadian-Ukrainian Congress appeared, the issue of alternatives had been raised, specifically of the Gazprom pipeline on Ukrainian land, which you were stating could have been used to fully replace Nord Stream 1's capacity, and that this pipeline was currently used at less than 40% of its current capacity. Now that we know that Nord Stream 1 is no longer working, my question is this: supply through this Ukrainian pipeline, has that also been stopped, or is there still supply through that Ukrainian pipeline?
So just a point to clarify, the pipeline that goes through Ukraine is not owned by Gazprom. It's owned by the Ukrainian government and Ukrainian transit system. So that is actually one of the advantages of it, is that the ability to manipulate it the way that Gazprom manipulates Nord Stream 1 is not quite as apparent. Now, you know, Russia can of course shut gas on and off at the border as it pleases.
Mais au moment où on se parle,
But if you allow me, at this point, right now, has there been a cut in supply through that pipeline, or is it still ongoing?
My understanding, and I will check on this and get back to you, is that that pipeline is also not delivering gas as part of this, Peskov's statement stuff. But I do have to check on that. I don't know what the state of it is today, so I don't want to say something that's not accurate, and I will find that and email your office after this meeting.
Thank you. Peut-être, Monsieur le Président, informer
Mr. Chair, perhaps inform the clerk so all committee members can get the answer to that question. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Mr. Bergeron. We'll definitely do so. We now go to Ms. McPherson. Ms. McPherson, you have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. And like all of my colleagues, I would like to thank the members from the UCC for being here today. I'd also like to just take a moment and acknowledge the generosity that they have shown with regards to their time throughout this entire period. You know, I know that many of us request information from them, get information from them, and are informed by them on a very regular basis. So Torist and Ihor, thank you very much for that. And I would be amiss as well if I didn't acknowledge the UCC Alberta Council and what an amazing job that they are doing in my home province as well. I want to start today with the waiver question. I mean, that's ultimately why we are here. And similar to my colleague, Mr. Bergeron, I just don't understand why at this point the government has not been willing to revoke that waiver. You know, at the beginning, when this first came up, when we were first hearing that this was something that the government was considering, I very similarly to I think many of the people in this room felt that why on earth would we trust that Putin will do what he said? He's never done what he said. He's clearly weaponizing energy. He's clearly weaponizing food, weaponizing all kinds of those things. So why would we put trust in this? Now that he's made it very, very clear, and his government has made it clear that they will not be shipping the gas to Germany, I cannot get my head around why the government fails to revoke that waiver. So what I guess want to ask is, you know, when the Ambassador Kovalev was here in front of our committee, she talked about this being a dangerous precedent. And I'd love to hear from both of you on why you think this is a dangerous precedent, what examples you've seen of how this has proven to be a dangerous precedent. You know, Ihor, I think you mentioned that the Russians have asked for further concessions. Any more clarity you can give on that would be very, very welcome.
Thank you for your warm remarks, and I'll pass along our best to the UCC's Alberta Provincial Council. They are working incredibly hard to support the Ukrainian refugees that have arrived in that province. So, as you said, we believe it's a precedent. We've seen particularly on some sectors, for example, tariffs on fertilizer. There has been a lot of impact on the pricing of fertilizer because of the Canadian tariffs. Obviously, the impacts on the producers, the agricultural producers in Canada, and so we've seen pressure, on the government publicly to move on these tariffs, to reduce these tariffs, to exempt them, and so that's one example. I would say the most public example that we can give you where we've been urging the government to remain strong on this issue, to remain consistent. We don't think it's helpful. We think it's actually the goal of the Russian Federation to poke holes in both Canadian sanctions policy and in generally Western sanctions policy to because they do understand that the consistency and coordination is critical. So the more that they can, I don't think they particularly care what they poke holes into, but the more that they can poke holes in the sanctions regimes, find differences between jurisdictions, and build inconsistencies between our governments that are largely on the same page on this issue. We believe that is their overall goal, and part of their, as was said, part of their goal of disinformation, to say that that the West is kind of inconsistent and incoherent in applying this kind of pressure. So, Orest, anything to add to that point?
No, I think you've covered it.
And for knowing that this is an attempt to poke holes in the sanction regime or the cohesiveness with our allies, which of course nobody wants to see, do you think that this waiver has and continues to impact on Canada's credibility around the world? And if so, what are the implications of that?
Well, I think it's become the most high-profile international issue, which involves NATO allies, Ukrainian allies, and continues to propel itself forward now for several months without resolution, and it has caused the kind of discussion in Canadian parliaments and other parliaments and in the media, which requires tough questions and tough answers. And as has been pointed out, I can't give you clear answers on why the Canadian government's position is thus, and you've heard from the German government's representative about their position as well, which we certainly have questions about as well. So I think this example can be wrapped up, as you said, with a review of this waiver, with a review of the facts and the situation on the ground, with an undertaking to work with the government of Ukraine as they had pledged through their ambassador, through their government, in their previous and initial reaction to the suspension. We believe there are many better options. There continues to be many better options than the current situation, and are, I would say, surprised by the entrenchment, perhaps, of the positions and reluctance to listen to alternatives.
Yeah, I was also surprised by that, by Minister Joly not agreeing to look at that. And certainly, I think this committee should be looking at that as we go forward.
Thank you, Ms. McPherson. That concludes the first round of questioning. We will now move to the second one. Regrettably, we're going to have to adjust the time a bit, so each member will be provided 4 minutes. And we start with Mr. McLean. Mr. McLean, welcome. The floor is yours for 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and allow me to extend a welcome to Mr. Mikkelshushin and Mr. Zakadalski. Thank you for coming here today. First question, allow me to reiterate our support for the people of Ukraine in their valiant fight against an aggressive and hostile invading army. Canada should be doing all that it can to assist the democratic and free Ukrainian people in upholding their sovereignty and their right to live as free people in their own country. In my opinion, this includes maintaining sanctions on all trade with Russia. Now, as recently as August 22nd, Canada's Prime Minister stated, Canada will be there to support Ukraine and Ukrainian people with what they need for as long as it takes. Words in the air, without any substance, after the government's decision in July to grant a 2-year exemption to federal sanctions, allowing a Canadian company to return repaired turbines from a Russian-German natural gas pipeline. A decision Ukraine's President, Vladimir Zelensky, called a manifestation of weakness, with which I agree. No sooner had the Canadian government capitulated than Russia constrained supply of natural gas to Europe. The narrative quickly changed to saying that we called Russia's bluff because we didn't want to be blamed for the shutdown of Russian energy delivery to Europe. Now, Mr. Mikkelshushin, is it your opinion there was any bluff to call, or this is just another narrative pivoting from a government with diminishing relevance in international affairs?
Thank you for the question. As our president said several weeks ago, as we're saying today, we don't think that meeting Russian deadlines, which we would call bending to Russian blackmail, to cancel these sanctions and enact exemptions as per the desire of the Russian Federation. We don't think that that's a wise move. We support Canada working as a strong Ukrainian partner, as is Germany, as are many countries which are meeting to decide, their future support. But we think that we can't overlook this. This has become a major international matter. It is part of the Russian disinformation flow, as has been said, and they continue to find an oil leak a week, basically, to find reasons why they're not going to provide more energy to Europe. So we respectfully call on the government to reconsider.
Yeah, thank you. And let's explore energy security and the notion of weaponizing energy that one of my colleagues previously referred to. In 2009, Ukraine underwent its own natural gas supply conflict with Russia. In that sense, Russia showed a clear resolve to weaponize its energy supply to Europe. In spite of this, many European countries ignored the obvious and doubled down on the supply of Russian gas. If Nord Stream 2 had been finalized, fully 80% of Germany's natural gas would have come from Russia. Can you comment on the naivety of European countries doubling down on energy supply from a hostile provider for the sake of relatively cheap energy versus the obvious outcome of the energy insecurity that was going to ensue?
I would say, first of all, in Nord Stream 2, it was completed, and as many people said at the time, its completion will make a larger Russian invasion of Ukraine far more likely, which is what transpired weeks after the completion of Nord Stream 2. The full-out invasion was launched. I mean, we've seen, thankfully, the German government has canceled, for now anyway, it's the certification of the pipeline. I would say that, through the last decade or more, there were a lot of voices in Europe and in North America making quite clear to European partners that the policy that they were pursuing was not conducive to European security. Even Nord Stream 2 was strongly opposed by the American government, and who decided to, let Germany pursue this policy despite American misgivings. The result is what we see now. Thankfully, after the full Russian invasion of Ukraine, a lot of European countries are revisiting the wisdom of their policy and are changing it. Now, it is no comfort to the Ukrainian people nor to us that happened after a Russian invasion in which tens of thousands of people have already been killed and thousands more will be killed.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Mr. Zakadowski. Let me intervene. I've only got so much time here, and it's a point I also raised with the German ambassador a year and a half ago.
Mr. McLean, I'm afraid you're way over time, so we're going to have to go to the next member. And the next member is Mr. Sarai. You have 4 minutes, Mr. Sarai.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to both witnesses. We've been hearing a lot about this topic and just the invasion of Ukraine by Russia in general, and it's important to everyone's hearts here in Canada, and I want to let you know that we take this very seriously. What we've noticed is unity in the response to Russia's invasion has been key, and Putin's goal clearly remains to try to divide NATO and the European Union countries. One of the successes has been the fact that the response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine has been negated, has been opposed, and strongly opposed by European countries, specifically NATO, and it's been unified in its response, whether that's giving military aid, whether that's giving aid in general, or whether it's giving support at the United Nations or elsewhere. How important do you see the maintenance of European Union support for Ukraine is as this war unfortunately drags on? Mr.
Yeah, thanks for the question. We know, tomorrow, I think it's about 40 countries that support Ukraine with defensive weapons are meeting to review what they can do to support Ukraine. As I think was mentioned at the previous meeting, it's quite clear that within Europe, there are differences of opinion on this issue. The EU members that border Russia, the Baltic states, Central and Eastern European states, have a very different view and understanding through history and experience of dependency on Russia, and I think have a quite different view than Germany and some of the other countries that have this reliance on Russian gas. So I think obviously the unity of Ukrainian allies is important, which is why the Ukrainian government, I think, took the unprecedented step of making a statement in this case, of speaking both to Germany and to Ukraine, and to Canada as allies of its war effort, of its humanitarian appeals as well. So we definitely believe that this unity must continue, and that's why we think the path back to this unity of purpose and unity of messaging and actions is to review this decision.
And I just want to be clear, currently there's only a permission for the Siemens turbines. There's no other relaxation of sanctions. And regardless, as we've noticed, they're not being used, but if we impose the sanctions back, they still won't be used, or they may be used. It wouldn't have any significant impact that I see, regardless of one way or the other than the German people knowing that Canada didn't do anything to block their energy needs. I just want to be clear that there's no other sanctions that were lifted based on this Siemens turbine exemption to be serviced.
Again, as far as we know at this point, the exemption is, as you know and as we know, is for these 6 turbines for 2 years, which actually was far more broad than the initial story was about one particular turbine. So that has continued to evolve, and I think with the attention of this committee and with the attention of the public, we have not seen any other changes on any other sanctions policies yet.
And just Chair, if I'm out of time, I'll leave that. The Chair, you're on mute.
I'm afraid you have 10 seconds, Mr. Sarai.
No, it's all good. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for that. We next go to Mr. Bergeron. Mr. Bergeron, you have 2 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When the government took the decision to allow this exemption, at the Bloc Québécois, we believed it was certainly a tough decision to make. That the Canadian government found itself between a rock and a hard place, and that it had to sort of choose between cholera and malaria, if you will, a very difficult decision to take. We found that we believe that the government must have had excellent reasons for making that particular decision at that time. However, in the same breath, we added that it needed to lead to a new round of sanctions and increasing military aid from Canada to Ukraine. But we have not noted increased sanctions since then, and as to military assistance, according to the government site titled Military Support to Ukraine, apart from the Operation Unified, there has been no announcement for the federal government as to providing military equipment to Ukraine, even though it was extremely important to do this, as the ambassador for Ukraine mentioned over 2 months ago. The ambassador really focused on the fact that these supplies needed to reach Ukraine this summer, that was imperative. How do you view the responses that have been provided to us by Ministers Wilkinson and Joly as to the reasons why they took this difficult decision? And also, how do you view that issue of support, Canadian support to Ukraine since then? to your mind, does this meet the needs expressed by Ukrainians?
If I could ask that you limit your response to 30 seconds, please.
So very quickly,
Pardon, point d'ordre, Monsieur le Président.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. Did we not have 4 minutes?
Had 2 minutes.
Ah, ça n'a pas.
Oh, I didn't hear that.
J'ai pas entendu.
I didn't hear that. Gentlemen?
Okay, very quickly, with regard to your earlier question about the pipeline, the Ukrainian pipeline is working at the same 40% capacity that it was. With regard to your question about Minister Joly and Minister Wilkinson's reasoning, we respectfully disagree. With regard to your question about the supply of weapons to Ukraine, we have just written to Minister Anand calling for the government to make another substantial announcement of weapons deliveries following up on the announcement in Budget 2022. So we look forward to a response from the Department of Defense and from the Canadian government on further deliveries of weapons. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. Now we go to Ms. McPherson. You have 2 minutes, Ms. McPherson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, this whole conversation is around the sanctions regime, and I have found it incredibly difficult to get information about the sanctions, the details of what's been seized, the details of the sanctions, not who's been sanctioned, but how much and what. So I'd like to just take a moment, if I could, please bear with me, to read into the Hansard a request, a motion that I brought forward on May 31st, 2022. And it is that pursuant to Standing Order 108.2, the committee conduct a follow-up study to the 2017 Foreign Affairs Committee study on Canada's sanction regime, titled A Coherent and Effective Approach to Canada's Sanction Regimes, Sergei Magnitsky and Beyond, and that the committee review the government's implementation of the recommendations in the 2017 report, that the committee review the need for new recommendations, if any, resulting from Canada's response to the situation in Ukraine and other situations since 2017, that the committee hold no fewer than 4 meetings, that the committee report its findings to the House, and that pursuant to Standing Order 109, the government table a comprehensive response to the report. I would like to have an opportunity for the subcommittee to discuss this. I think what we've heard from our witnesses from the UCC is that our sanction regime needs to be re-examined very carefully. We've heard that the waiver has fundamentally damaged our sanction regime and has fundamentally damaged the credibility of Canada. So I think it is imperative that this committee undertakes a study at the soonest possible moment. I will end at that point because I know I'm very close to my 2 minutes. Mr. Orest and Yor, I'd like to thank you both very much for being here. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us again.
Thank you, Ms. McPherson. We now go to Mr. Abdeltaif. Mr. Abdeltaif, you have 4 minutes.
Mr. Chair, I don't believe Mr. Abdeltaif is on it, so either I or Mr. Chong could take the round. I'll defer to Mr. Chong if he wants to, but otherwise I'm happy to proceed. I guess this is the limits of hybrid meetings, that we can't whisper to each other like we normally do. But
you might as well proceed,
okay,
Mr.
all right,
Jennings.
I'll proceed. Excellent, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could you both comment, or one of you comment on the impact that this turbine decision has had on Canada-Ukraine relations? President Zelensky chose to speak personally to this issue. I know from friends and contacts I've spoken to in Ukraine, there's just a lot of disappointment, a sense of betrayal. There's a long history of close relations between Canada and Ukraine, but in this very dark time for Ukraine, what was the significance of this decision for Ukraine? And then maybe related to that, the government talks about standing with our allies. Our ally Germany, our ally the US said this is okay, but Ukraine is supposed to be an ally, and yet the government speaks of standing with our allies with no acknowledgement of the response to this decision from Ukraine.
Thank you. As you've seen the president's statements, you've heard the ambassador's statements, so I don't need to repeat those. We believe that the path forward was going to involve more direct cooperation between Canada, Germany, and Ukraine to find a solution that everybody was pleased with and comfortable with. Ukraine counts on Canada as a key ally, in the last 30 years of building its democracy, and particularly now at this moment of greatest need with a Russian invasion. So it isn't a great moment. It isn't a great moment to have allies arguing between each other about this, but we do know that the Ukrainian people, have the support of Canada, have the support of the Canadian people, and we look forward to moving past this conversation, moving past this specific topic to return to a strong sanctions regime and focus on the future where there is more discussion on what Canada can do next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I personally, I think the study that Ms. McPherson spoke about into the effectiveness of our sanctions regime would be very important and worthwhile, building on the work that we're doing in the context of this discussion. Kind of a follow-up question to Mr. Bergeron's point. There are some of us who took the position right at the beginning that this was a terrible decision, and that was where we were at as a Conservative Party. But I think there were others who were maybe a little bit more sympathetic to the government's decision initially, and then since more facts have become clear, since Russia hasn't used Gazprom hasn't taken the first turbine and is seeking further concessions. More and more people are coming over to the point of view that surely, even if the decision was justifiable in the first instance, there's no reason to continue the waiver now. Have you had ongoing engagement with the government? Even in the last couple days since the most recent announcements from the Kremlin, what is the government saying now? Are they saying the same things? Are they saying different things compared to what they were saying at the beginning of this?
I'll quickly just answer. We've about a week or more ago, we wrote again to Minister Joly, making the point that now is the time to cancel this waiver. We have we have not yet heard back from the Office of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and we will follow up. And should we hear something, we will of course be happy to share that.
Okay, thank you. And I'm assuming you would welcome the opportunity for further engagement with the minister. I know we would welcome the opportunity to have her back as some of these new revelations have come out. Are you seeking opportunities just for further engagement with the minister to get clarity on what the government's position is now in light of the new information?
Yes, definitely. We continue to reach out to her office, and we look for public statements and have been open to hearing any developments from their perspective.
Yeah. Further following up on Mr. Zubari's comments, one of the principal arguments for sending this turbine.
I'm afraid you're out of time, Mr. Jennis. We now go to Ms. Bendayan. You have 4 minutes. Ms. Bendayan.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. J'espère que...
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I hope you can hear me. Before I move to questions, I'd just like to get back quickly to the subject raised by my colleague, Mr. Bergeron. The issue of blackmail and Nord Stream, the pipeline that travels through Ukraine and gets to the EU through Slovakia is operational. The volumes are stable. And again, based on my knowledge, those are the only 2 land means to bring gas over land in Europe. Of course, I'm very interested in asking questions of our 2 witnesses. Gentlemen.
I'll ask in a first instance, since we are, we are having, this discussion with you today, and you mentioned in your opening statement that you encouraged our committee to travel to Ukraine. I'm sure, as you know, we had travel plans that were vetoed in the House of Commons by the Conservative Party. Are you aware, gentlemen, of why that travel was vetoed?
No, we're not privy to the discussions of the committee in terms of travel, but we've certainly encouraged our parliamentarians and the government officials to travel to Ukraine at the safest and earliest opportunity.
Thank you. I also know that in your introduction, you encouraged Canada to continue supporting Ukraine militarily. My understanding is that one of the things Ukraine needs most right now are armored vehicles. And we know how crucial armored vehicles are to the operation that is ongoing actually at the moment, in the hopes that Ukraine will be able to retake some of its territory. Canada has already sent some armored vehicles to Ukraine, and I do note that one country that has large stocks of these vehicles but seems to be unwilling to send them to Ukraine is Germany. Do you have any information about Germany's refusal to provide these, and how can we make sure to get more armored vehicles to Ukraine quickly?
Germany is providing weapons to Ukraine. It is providing them at a pace that is not the pace we would like to see. And any of your engagements with your German counterparts in the Bundestag that would get them to put pressure on the German government to speed up these deliveries would be most welcome by us.
Very good, thank you. And given that we are about to enter winter, and certainly we're hearing a lot about the challenging winter ahead for Europe, but I believe the winter will be also challenging for Ukraine, given how snow and cold might affect your military operations. How do you see the coming months in Ukraine on the ground, and how can we make sure that you have the best possible tools over the course of the coming months?
I think from an immediate civilian survival perspective, I know we have, through our humanitarian appeal, begun to talk about winterization. And we know that there are substantial funds that the government of Canada has yet to expend. I believe about $75 million that could be spent on winterization, which means everything from providing heating, basic repairs for people, all of these devastated villages that we've seen on our screens, where roofs and doors and windows are gone and people are left cooking over, basically campfire or stoves. So civilian winterization is essential to enable people to survive. And as we said, the next steps on military and security support, together with our allies, identifying does Canada have more light armored vehicles or more missiles or more communication systems that would be effective for the Ukrainian army to continue its offensive, so that the war is victorious in the nearest time.
So what I'm hearing from you gentlemen—
Ms. Ben-Diana, I'm afraid you're out of time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Now, on that note, allow me to thank Mr. Mikhail Chishin and Mr. Zakidalski for once again having made themselves available to all the members. I know I speak on behalf of all of us when I thank you for the tremendous advocacy you are doing, and for always having been the font of knowledge on all issues relating to Ukraine. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. It's an honor to speak with you.
Now, members, we'll suspend the meeting briefly, just for a few minutes to allow our witnesses to leave. And we will, of course, continue for the second hour with 3 new witnesses. Thank you. issue of turbines to be exported to Europe. We are very, very privileged to have three distinguished witnesses with us for this hour. We have Dr. Devlin, who is with the Macdonald-Laurier Institute, Dr. Kolga, also with the Macdonald-Laurier Institute, and Dr. Schmidt, who is a research associate with the Harvard Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics and the Ukrainian Research Institute at Harvard. Let me say that we're very, very sorry, and we thank you for having been patient, but our first panel did run over for about 50 minutes, so we're very grateful that you have made yourself available. Each of you will have 5 minutes for your opening remarks, and we will begin with Dr. Devlin. Dr. Devlin, the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Today. Thank you very much for this opportunity to contribute to the committee's deliberations. My comments are aimed at shedding light on what I see as a central question when it comes to the debate about the gas turbines today. Should Canada revoke the permit allowing the maintenance of now infamous gas turbines? The answer to this question is a resounding yes.
Excuse me, I'm so sorry, Mr. Chair, I can't hear.
Okay. Should I go ahead? Okay, thank you very much. It's an honor to be here today. Thank you very much for this opportunity to talk to you. My comments are aimed at shedding light on what I see as the central question when it comes to the debate about the gas turbines. Should Canada revoke the permit allowing the maintenance of the now infamous gas turbines? The answer to this question is a resounding yes. Doing otherwise, that is, continuing with the sanctions exemption, does not advance Canada's interests, does not help our allies, our European allies, with their energy problems, and continues to provide the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin with the opportunities for blackmail and leverage against the West. Let me briefly elaborate in the 5 minutes that I have. It is clear to all that the technical issues have nothing to do with Russia's decision, first to reduce and then completely shut down gas flows to Europe via Nord Stream 1. Russia's actions over the years, and particularly in the last few months, made this very clear. There is no need to go over that familiar terrain that has been covered in the deliberations of this committee again. It's a political decision aimed at blackmailing and forcing Europe to seize or to ease or break sanctions imposed on Russia as a result of its brutal and unprovoked invasion of Ukraine. Kremlin spokesperson Peskov said as much, and with great clarity, on Monday, and I would add Putin repeated the same thing today in his remarks. It is also a fact that this fact is clearly recognized by German and other European publics, as polling consistently indicates. It will be giving too little credit to European public's political sophistication to argue that they will buy into Russian excuses and blame Canada for the difficulties. Therefore, it is clear that Canada's decision to continue to provide an exemption for the gas turbines will have no role in determining whether Russia will resume gas flows to Europe or not. Nor will revoking the permit lead to a backlash against Canada from the Europeans. What it does, however, is to provide an ongoing point of leverage for the Kremlin to create friction and discord between allies, and enabling the Kremlin to develop a narrative of Western weakness and disunity by pointing out the carve-outs within the sanctions regime. In other words, Kremlin turns to other countries and says, look, Canada, Germany, and other Western powers immediately violate their own sanctions regime and carve out exemptions when their domestic interests are threatened. Why would you go along with this and pay the price while they are not interested in doing the same? And Putin is basically repeating the same line today in his talk. Continuing with the exemption also does not help our European allies with their energy needs. What would help is to get Canadian LNG to them, as they have been asking for publicly and very clearly. Not only has Chancellor Scholz voiced his desire for more Canadian LNG, but also other allies, such as Poland and Latvia, have been calling for more Canadian gas to Europe for a while. Clearing the obstacles in front of this real and tangible support for Canada's allies is what is urgently needed. That is what a good ally would do. Lastly, it is important to keep in mind the broader geopolitical context in which this issue needs to be considered. The strategic goal for Canada must be Ukrainian victory in this war. Supporting Ukraine is not charity, but enlightened self-interest. What is at stake for Canada is not only the security and prosperity of our European allies, but also the future of rules-based international order that has benefited Canada and Canadians immensely. The country, Russia, that launched this brutal attack on that international order is not far to the east of us, but an immediate neighbor to the north in the Arctic. Policies that provide leverage and opportunity for Russia are not in the interest of Canada. To recapitulate, whatever the initial merits of the decision to provide an exemption, there are no strategic, political, or economic reasons now to continue to provide Russia with potential leverage for the next 2 years. It neither advances Canada's interests nor elevates our allies' suffering. The permit should be revoked, and Canada should look for ways to get its LNG to European markets as far as it can. Thank you very much for this opportunity to talk to you today.
Thank you very much, Dr. Devlin. We next go to Dr. Kolga. Dr. Kolga, welcome. You have 5 minutes for your opening remarks.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I hope you can hear me. I am simply Mr. Marcus Kolga, not Dr. Marcus Kolga. Thanks to you and the members of the committee for this opportunity to appear before you today. Over the past months, Russia has threatened to starve vulnerable nations around the world by blockading millions of tons of Ukrainian grain while shelling and bombing critical Ukrainian agricultural infrastructure to induce a global grain shortage. At the same time, Russia has falsely blamed Western and Canadian sanctions for causing this food crisis, despite the fact that our sanctions do not affect any Ukrainian agricultural infrastructure or the transport of grain and food to those nations that rely on it. Russia's weaponization of hunger is matched in cruelty by its use of energy to freeze Russia's neighbors. Many Europeans experienced this firsthand when Russia cut all gas supplies transiting Ukraine in January of 2009. Canadians only recently became aware of Putin's energy warfare after Global Affairs granted Gazprom a sanctions exemption to permit the repair in Canada of turbines that compress gas exported from Russia through the Nord Stream pipeline to Europe. However, the Kremlin's use of energy as a point of geopolitical leverage did not emerge out of a vacuum. The former vice president of Gazprom Bank, Igor Volobiev, told a Polish newspaper in May how he was instructed by Gazprom executives to develop anti-Ukrainian narratives already in 2005 when Ukraine's political trajectory shifted towards Europe. He also created anti-Georgian narratives in 2008 when Russia invaded South Ossetia and Abkhazia. According to Volobiev, all decisions within Gazprom are made inside the Russian presidential administration. If Canada's decision to grant Gazprom a sanctions waiver was intended to call Putin's bluff, that mission has been accomplished. It is now clear that our sanctions did not impair Gazprom's ability to pump gas through the Nord Stream pipeline. As we've heard from previous witnesses today, they never were. Underscoring the false nature of Russia's accusations was a recent report published by the BBC, which exposed massive gas flares at Gazprom's Portovaya compression station near the Russian starting point of the Nord Stream pipeline. Flaring is a process by which gas producers burn off large quantities of gas for sustained periods of time. According to that report, $10 million of gas are being burned off by Gazprom each day, gas which would otherwise be pumped through Nord Stream to Germany and Europe or through existing pipelines that transit Ukraine and Poland. Indeed, as other witnesses have pointed out, the Kremlin has now explicitly stated that gas will only start flowing through Nord Stream once Canadian and Western sanctions have been lifted. This is blackmail. Vladimir Putin's intent is to weaponize gas in order to erode Western support for Ukraine and undermine Canadian and allied democracies by blaming us for rising inflation and energy costs through disinformation. This is happening right now. This morning, in fact, in Vladivostok, Vladimir Putin doubled down on his accusations about Western sanctions and even claimed, quote, "We did not start anything in terms of military actions. We are trying to end it." Putin made it very clear as well at the same time that polarization of the democratic world that his regime is actively contributing to will greatly benefit Russia. We're currently witnessing Russian state media and pro-authoritarian groups promote these exact narratives. Protests that were organized by Kremlin-aligned communists and populist neo-fascists in Europe this past weekend will be exploited by Russian propagandists to build on them and destabilize Western democracies. We cannot rule out that these false narratives will not inspire similar protests among Canadian far-right and far-left extremist groups. In Putin's own words, the sole beneficiary of this polarization is his regime. Now that Putin's bluff is being called, the sanctions waiver issued by Global Affairs should be revoked, and the integrity of Canada's sanctions regime should be restored. Sanctions work when they are applied, sustained, and enforced. Finally, Canada should prioritize the development of infrastructure to export Canadian gas to Europe, as many of our allies have asked us to do. Canadian small nuclear reactor technology can also help our allies take control of their own supply of electricity. In fact, Estonia recently signed an agreement just to do that. Canada can provide a mutually beneficial contribution to European energy security that will lead to greater overall European stability if we only commit to it. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Kolga. We next go to Dr. Schmidt. Dr. Schmidt, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Hello and bonjour, Chair Assassi, Vice Chair Bergeron, distinguished members of the Canadian Parliament, merci, and thank you for the opportunity to speak about supporting Europe's energy security today. Je m'appelle Dr. Bonjour.
I'm Dr. Benjamin L. Schmidt. I am an astrophysics research associate in Harvard.
I'm a former European Energy Security Advisor from the U.S. Department of State, and currently I am a research associate at the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics and Harvard-Ukrainian Research Institute, senior fellow at the Center for European Policy Analysis, and a Rethinking Diplomacy fellow at Duke University. We meet today nearly 7 months since Moscow unleashed its horrific campaign of chaos in Ukraine. But let's be clear, just as Putin's military aggression against Ukraine didn't start with its February large-scale invasion, the Kremlin's wider hybrid aggression against global democracies, including weaponized energy, is nothing new as well. So with this in mind, we can look back on 3 critical lessons. First, energy and critical infrastructure proposals advanced by Putin's authoritarian regime are not just commercial deals. Nord Stream n'est pas seulement un accord commercial.
It is not solely a commercial agreement.
Tool to slow and stop Kremlin malign energy activities over the years. And third, that technology export controls remain vital to throttle the Kremlin's ability to acquire systems and components needed to both wage and fund its horrific war. Given total state control in authoritarian nations like Russia, nearly every sector of society can be weaponized to advance geopolitical aims, from cyberspace to supply chains to space assets and, of course, energy for political blackmail. So knowing this, undermining sanctions unity on the Nord Stream 1 turbines simply to quote-unquote call Putin's bluff is only justifiable in a world where Russia hasn't been weaponizing energy for years. But it has. For context, we can look at Putin's Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Nord Stream 2 was a long-running geostrategic anchor that Germany clung to openly as Russia created a gas crisis last year. In 2021, the Kremlin intentionally limited natural gas volumes destined for European storages, most of which were owned by Gazprom. Despite this reality, Berlin convinced the United States government to waive its own mandatory bipartisan sanctions aimed at stopping Nord Stream 2, with Berlin agreeing to seek EU sanctions in the case that Russia took further steps to weaponize its energy resources. Even though Putin did just that, Berlin failed to seek those sanctions, emboldening Putin's confidence that energy pressure could limit the latitude of foreign policy responses to Russia's horrific war against Ukraine. Thankfully, Washington finally sanctioned Nord Stream 2 AG and its corporate officers just hours before Putin's large-scale invasion began, ending the project hopefully for good. But distressingly, even with this fresh lesson in mind, history seems to be repeating itself here in Canada. For months, Gazprom has cut flows to at least a dozen EU member states, including via its Nord Stream 1 pipeline, since mid-June, cut by 60, 80, and now 100%. Multiple technical assessments from German ministries and officials stated that Russia's explanation for these cuts, supposed technical issues, quote unquote, that could only be solved, quote unquote, by receiving stranded Siemens turbines near Montreal, were nothing more than pretext for another political energy cut. That's why it's so baffling that Berlin simultaneously pressured Ottawa to undermine its own technology sanctions against Russia, even if Gazprom's dubious technical justifications had merit, and they do not have merit. The Kremlin could easily restore gas deliveries to Europe right now via other routes where it's limiting flows. That it refuses to do so speaks volumes about Putin's malign intent. Berlin pressuring Ottawa to undermine sanctions unity through the turbine waiver sets a worrying precedent from which the Kremlin will learn a troubling lesson, one that weaponizing energy dependence can be effective at breaking Western consensus on the very technology export controls that are curbing Russia's military potential and economic engine. Russia's refusal this summer to take custody of the first of the turbines transferred to Germany raises questions about Ottawa's subsequent decision to stand by its waiver after the visit of German Chancellor Scholz in late August, when news reports say that it authorized the transfer of 5 additional Siemens turbines. To cap off the saga, this week Kremlin spokesman Peskov stated out loud what the world knew for months. The turbine story was a cover for energy weaponization, declaring that the cuts will continue until sanctions are dropped and that, quote, other reasons that would cause problems with the pumping simply don't exist. So in closing, I'll leave you with 3 very brief recommendations. Number 1, Canada should reverse the turbine sanctions waiver as soon as possible, backed by political endorsements from Germany and the United States. 2, Canada should expand sanctions on the Putin regime and increase LNG export capacity, incentivizing exports to European partners and allies. And 3, Canada should pass legislation to curb Kremlin's strategic corruption in Western democracies, just like that which I proposed to U.S. Congress called the Stop Helping America's Malign Enemies, or SHAME Act. In our dire struggle against Russia's criminal onslaught against Ukraine, Putin and his authoritarian cronies need to see a wall of strength from democracies unwilling to waver in their resolve to hold the Kremlin to account. Then there will be only one nation forced to change its foreign policy in order to avoid, quote unquote, Ukraine fatigue, and that would be Putin's Russia. Thank you for your attention. I look forward to your questions today.
Thank you, Mr. Schmidt. We now go to questions by the members, and the first member is Mr. Chong. Mr. Chong, you have the floor for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just before I direct my questions to the witnesses, I'm wondering if you invited the Foreign Affairs Minister of Ukraine to appear in front of this committee, and if so, what was the response?
Mr. Chong, I can assure you that I've been advised by the clerk that the Foreign Minister of Ukraine was invited. An invitation was extended, but regrettably, he was not available.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to direct my question to Dr. Schmidt. According to the Finnish Center for Research on Energy and Clean Air, Russia has raked in 158 billion euros since the war began in Ukraine for the sale of oil and gas exports, more than half of which has been to the European Union. In fact, this Finnish Research Center has indicated in its report that 43 billion euros have been added to the Russian budget from the sale of these exports to the European Union. Canada could displace Russian gas in Western Europe. We are the 5th largest natural gas producer in the world. We have the longest coastline in the world. And on my back of the napkin calculation, a simple 15% increase in Canadian natural gas production could displace more than a third of all Russian gas in Western Europe. Recently, Chancellor Scholz was here in Canada and he said, quote, "Germany is moving away from Russian energy at warp speed. Canada is our partner of choice." End quote. He further added comment, quote, "For now, this means increasing our LNG imports. We hope that Canadian LNG will play a major role in this," end quote. The Canadian Prime Minister rejected the German request to work with Germany to export more Canadian LNG to Europe. I'd like your comments on that.
Well, I think that Canada can play a major role here. Obviously, increasing the amount of export infrastructure on on Canada's Atlantic coast is incredibly important, as well as using the St. Lawrence Seaway to the greatest extent possible, potentially to bring LNG through the Great Lakes. Again, I defer to Canadian experts on the various routes, but it can be done. Now, with that in mind, we also have to look at the extent that Canada and other Western allies can help the EU take a wartime level of effort to build out the energy import infrastructure as quickly as possible to increase the bandwidth of LNG that can be brought in to displace Russian natural gas. Of course, we want to move to renewables as quickly as possible. Of course, we need to address the climate crisis. But in a wartime contingency, we need a one-for-one swap with these volumes.
Well, on that last point, Dr. Schmidt, the current government has indicated it takes 5 to 10 years to build an LNG facility here in Canada, but Germany is about to construct 2 new LNG terminals in the Baltic Sea in about 12 months. Germany is not a major energy producer, yet they're able to construct these 2 new terminals in the Baltic Sea in just over 12 months. That's what the German economic minister has recently said. They announced the construction of these 2 new terminals just shortly after the war began on February 24th. And yet we, as an energy producer, the 5th largest natural gas producer in the world with an immense capability to engineer, to design, and to build energy infrastructure, has a government that says it's going to take 5 to 10 years to construct. I want to finish on this point and allow you to comment on it. The Prime Minister said during Chancellor Scholz's visit that, quote, "There never has been a strong business case, end quote, for LNG facilities on the East Coast. And yet Timothy Egan, who's president of the Canadian Gas Association, essentially said the Prime Minister is wrong. He said the biggest obstacle is not that there isn't a business case, but regulatory uncertainty from the federal government. He said, quote, there's an incredible business case if the regulatory framework is clear. Are the environmental approval processes going to be fast enough and clear enough? How is it that this can happen so quickly in the United States and it can't happen as quickly in Canada, end quote? So I'd like your comment on our inability to be a willing partner in the NATO alliance to step up to the plate to export natural gas to Europe to displace Russian gas, which is funding Putin's war machine.
I think that Canada needs to, just like a lot of the G7 members that are producers, including the United States and others, to make sure that global democracies are making our energy resources available to Europe as quickly as possible. But I do want to point out on the German side, you know, they're doing a number of things. Number one, you have 2 floating storage and regasification units in Brunsbüttel and Wilhelmshaven, Germany, that are being built. But there also is a need to build out floating storage and regasification units, or floating LNG import terminals, at locations that are strategic and have existing infrastructure. And there's been, you know, some churn in the media about potential, companies that are thinking about this at Lubmin, Germany. But Lubmin, Germany is the point of contact where Nord Stream 2 comes on shore. And in June, the Econ Ministry in Berlin came out and said that they were considering the following plan, which was to expropriate the Nord Stream 2 pipelines in German waters, physically cut and sever them away from the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which is currently unused due to U.S. sanctions, and to attach them to floating storage and regasification units to bring non-Russian LNG through those systems and through the Lubmin gas hub and the Oigal pipeline onshore, basically, again, having a wartime level of effort and speed to leverage existing infrastructure. That still hasn't happened yet. We need more signals from Berlin that that's going to happen. But look, that's got to happen infrastructure-wise on both sides of the Atlantic, and we need to do it awful quick.
I have no further questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chong. We next go to Mr. Sidhu. Mr. Sidhu, you have the floor for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to thank the witnesses for joining us this afternoon. My first question is for Mr. Kolga. You have previously spoken to the opportunities for trade and stronger relations between Canada and the Baltic states. And I was hoping you could speak to the importance of building these ties in the context of Russia's aggression in the region, and on why it's key for Canada to expand its diplomatic as well as military presence in the region.
Well, thank you very much for that question, Mr. Chair. There certainly is demand in the Baltic states, and there has been quite some time for the export of Canadian energy. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, Canada and Estonia have just recently signed an agreement to develop a program to build small-scale nuclear reactors in Estonia to wean that country off of Russian electrical supplies. Lithuania, just about 4 years ago, built an offshore LNG terminal, and officials in all 3 Baltic states have clearly stated that they would welcome Canadian gas in those countries. There are opportunities for Canada to begin exporting gas quickly. In the previous question, there was a question about the timelines to build some of this infrastructure. In the United States, there is technology available right now to build offshore export LNG terminals off the coast of Canada. These could be built within 12 months, and we could start exporting LNG gas to the Baltic states and other European countries quite quickly. Other trade opportunities are, of course, in the IT sector. Estonia is a leader in developing e-government technologies and such. They've recently set up shop here in Canada, and I think that Canada could greatly benefit from working with Estonia to develop our own technologies here. So there are plenty of opportunities, and the fact that Canada has established and has announced it will establish full embassies in all 3 Baltic states is certainly a positive sign.
Thank you for those insights, Mr. Kolga. Mr. Chair, through you, Dr. Devlin, my question is for you next. You have written about the threat posed by President Lukashenko and his gray zone aggression against NATO and the EU. Are you able to speak to his role in the current conflict and how you see Belarus's role evolving as this conflict continues?
Thank you very much for this question. Effectively speaking, Belarus is a de facto colony of Russia right now under Lukashenko's rule. It has been and it continues to be a staging ground for Russian forces. At the first phase of the war, they did invade from Belarus as well, continue to carry out military strikes from Belarus. The Russian planes and Air Force continue to attack Ukraine through Belarus, and Belarusian ammunition depots, missiles and artillery shells, etc., are being basically transported and used by Russia in this war. Perhaps there's the only silver lining is that partly because of the resistance, because of the Belarusian people, Lukashenko could not enter the war in full force on the side of Russia, knowing that there is huge resistance, a significant resistance to such a clear, open intervention. But that does not necessarily mean that it will not happen in the future, particularly if Ukrainian offensive, counteroffensive in the south goes well. Russia might end up using the available strategic resources, particularly long-range missiles and others in Belarus to threaten and attack Kiev more, not necessarily with ground troops, but with missiles and artillery shells and Air Force. That might bring in Belarus into fight more. But we have to treat and assume that Belarus under Lukashenko continue to pose a threat to European peace and stability.
Thank you, Dr. Devlin. I believe I have about a minute and a half left, so really quick question.
Mr. Sidhu, if I could just ask that you use the microphone at the bottom left of your screen. We're having some trouble understanding what you're saying.
Oh, very sorry. I don't know what's going on here. I don't know if that's better or not, but I'll speak a little bit slowly. I've got a minute left, open to all panelists. What do you see as the next critical phase of this war? What should we be watching for that would suggest positive or negative momentum for Ukraine? Again, I've got about a minute left, but it's open to anybody on the floor.
I'll be happy to jump in. This will be a long war. I think one of the biggest threats today is to resist the attempts by Russia, try to freeze the existing status quo when and if Ukrainian counteroffensive is successful and Russia tries to freeze the current battle lines instead of withdrawing. So I see that that's one of the biggest threats in the next 3 to 6 months.
And I'll just say one line saying that one of the biggest threats outside of Ukraine, outside of the conflict directly, is losing Western support, which we absolutely can't do to make sure that Western support is maintained so that Ukraine is supported with all of the weapons and all of the sanctions that are needed to make sure that the Putin regime cannot succeed in Ukraine. And so as we're going into this energy crisis that's been a crisis for almost 2 years now, we absolutely need to make sure that Putin cannot weaponize energy in order to diminish Western resolve to defeat the Russian Federation and make sure that Ukraine is victorious.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. We next go to Mr. Bergeron. Mr. Bergeron, you have 6 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to our witnesses. Thank you for being here. Thank you for the clarity of your comments. Mr. Schmidt, I must say that I thought it was refreshing to hear a few words in the language of Molière, or in French, from a colleague from the other side of the border. Thank you very much. My question is for Mr. Kolga. Insofar as the other witnesses want to say anything to that, then they're welcome. Two former generals from the U.S., David Petraeus and Wesley Clark, looked at the decision made by the government of Canada, and they said that there was the issue of a consensus among allies, whereas the former chief of the defense staff in Canada, Rick Hillier, seemed to say that it would mean lightened sanctions for Russia. Did we not actually end up with the worst of both scenarios? In other words, we have undermined cohesion among allies while opening the door to a weakened sanctions regime with Russia.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. Yes, I completely agree that we have arrived at the worst of both worlds. We've arrived at a lose-lose situation. The fact that we have compromised on these sanctions opens the door to other allies doing the same. They can justify that action by pointing to our decision to provide that exemption to Gazprom. That is problematic. I think that publicly our NATO allies are going to be, of course, supportive of any decision that we've taken. We worked with the Germans on this issue, but I know that privately, certainly amongst our Eastern European NATO allies in the Baltic states, Poland and beyond, I think that our decision did raise eyebrows. And I know that that decision also raised eyebrows amongst Russian opposition leaders as well. They all understand that what Putin is very much hoping for is a return to business as usual. The erosion of sanctions, as he clearly mentioned today in Vladivostok, is one of his primary goals at the moment. And so I think that Canada still has an opportunity to correct that decision by canceling that permit to Gazprom and rebuilding confidence in our sanctions regime. I think that's vital today, certainly to maintain that cohesion amongst our allies, but also to maintain trust in our own defense policy, foreign policy, and our sanctions policy.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. A question for Mr. Schmidt. Germany has apparently already reached 75% of stocks of gas for the winter. You said on Twitter that this could counter the use of weaponization of energy by Russia. Do you have some concerns, given the decision announced by Mr. Peskov, to the fact that there would be a definite cutting off of supply until the sanctions were lifted? Do you have some concerns that they may not be able to continue to store this energy?
Well, that's an incredibly prescient question, and that's something we're going to have to monitor over the next several weeks and months. The bottom line is, it's one thing to have storage. You absolutely need to have this storage built up as high as possible before the winter, but there's also has to be latent LNG imports or natural gas flows that are backing that up throughout the winter. So you have to have, it's not just fill it up to 100% and then you're good for the winter. You really need to have additional flows going on of that resource. So that means, if you can't increase the flows very much because Russia is actively cutting off gas flows, you also have to do a lot for energy efficiency. And that's exactly what the German government and German people are doing right now. And that's going to have to continue. It's going to have to continue across Europe. But partners and allies need to supply as much energy resource to Europe, especially in the next few months, as possible to make sure that they get through the winter.
Plusieurs experts réfutent l'idée.
Several experts are refuting the idea that the Siemens turbines are absolutely necessary for Nord Stream 1 to operate. Other models could have worked, and Russia seemingly has others in a reserve. In your view, is this a credible assessment?
No, it's not. The bottom line is we have to have policies that are based on science and technology that undergird our decision making. So simply to set up this scenario where we're pushing back on disinformation to call someone's bluff, the fact of the matter is that the German government several times pointed out that this was not backed up by technical reality, the Bundesnetzagentur, the Wirtschaftsministerium, et cetera, et cetera. Siemens just this week said about this purported oil leak that such leaks do not normally affect the operation of a turbine and can be sealed on site. It's a routine procedure within the scope of maintenance work. In the past, the occurrence of this type of leak has not led to a shutdown of operations. Bottom line is we need to turn back these waivers to restore sanctions unity, because Putin will enact as much as possible energy weaponization to open up where he's really being hurt right now, which is technology calibrated sanctions that are undermining his ability to get systems that can drive his economy, energy technologies and things of this nature, and also weapons, dual-use weapons technologies, things like semiconductors. There's been any number of reports of Ukrainian military personnel opening up captured Russian military equipment, and lo and behold, inside are commercial semiconductor products that are stripped out of products like washing machines and dishwashers and things like this. That means our technology sanctions are working. That's why we can't allow energy weaponization to push back on this technology calibrated technology sanctions approach. And that's why our foreign policy collectively as global democracies have to be driven by technical reality.
Now, thank you for that. We now go from Mr. Bergeron to Madam McPherson. Ms. McPherson, the floor is yours for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I would like to thank our witnesses today. It's been very enlightening. Before I start, I just want to take a moment. One of my biggest issues has been around the efficacy, the transparency, and the ability for Canadians to understand how our sanctions regime is working. I think probably some of you saw that I brought forward a motion earlier in the previous session. But I think it's important to note, Mr. Kolga, you were one of the witnesses, one of the key witnesses for the 2017 study, but we also had another witness that testified for this committee. Vladimir Kara-Murza was one of the witnesses. He was arrested in Russia in April. And he's facing 10 years, and today is his birthday. So I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that he has testified for this committee and is in a very, very difficult place, looking at 10 years imprisoned for criticizing the war in Ukraine. So I'm sorry, Mr. Kolga, and those that know Mr. Kara-Murza. To start with, I would actually like to start with you, Mr. Kolga. You were a key witness in 2017. You have talked about how this particular waiver has harmed our sanctions regime. There were recommendations that came out of the study of the sanctions regime in 2017 that have not been acted upon. Can you talk a little bit about how we could strengthen our sanctions regime, how we should be making it more transparent, more accountable, easier to understand for Canadians?
Well, thank you very much for that question. Yeah, I think there's a lot that Canada could be doing to make our own sanctions regime more effective. First and foremost is working with our allies to harmonize our policies and our legislation with the United States, EU, and the UK. We should be stepping up enforcement of our sanctions policy. To date, since the start of the war, the RCMP has seized $122.3 million worth of of Russian assets. We know for a fact that Russian oligarchs have billions of dollars of assets hidden well in plain sight in this country. We need to be doing a heck of a lot more if we intend to have use our sanctions policy as a consequence and a cost for these foreign regimes. Then we need to make sure that we're using that legislation properly. During the past 6 months, the Canadian government has actually enacted new legislation, an amendment to the Special Economic Measures Act that would also allow our government to repurpose some of those assets that have been frozen. We need to start using that legislation. We need to start repurposing some of those billions of dollars that are hidden in this country. And certainly we could use some of those funds to help support Ukraine in its struggle to push Russia back past the February 24th border and to reclaim Crimea, and certainly to rebuild that country. What we could also be doing is introducing a measure of transparency to that entire process, how those sanctions are imposed, who they're being imposed on, what sort of assets these targeted individuals have, and certainly some accountability through regular reporting. And I would also suggest that this committee should be given the power to nominate candidates for our sanctions list. You are experts in Parliament. You've heard from experts. You know who these human rights abusers are, those who threaten the stability of Western democracies and in their own countries. You know who these people are, and so giving this committee some more power to designate individuals and entities for our sanctions list is also important. But I would also say that one of the most important things that you could do is to have that review of our sanctions legislation as you've proposed. And I think a lot of other human rights activists in Canada and elsewhere would very much support this, as I'm sure Vladimir Kara-Murza would.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Well, and you talk about transparency and accountability, and I've asked multiple times in the House of Commons. I've put order paper questions through access to information, and I cannot get the answers I need. In fact, I've been told that because they can't give a pure or 100% accurate answer, they won't give me an answer at all. In fact, we've asked to have representatives from CBSA and RCMP attend this committee so we could get a better understanding of that. So I fully agree with you when you talk about the need for us to do that. Now, in terms of that review, the Magnitsky sanctions, are there other people that should be added to those lists? Is there more that should be done using that tool? We know that SEMA is being used. Is there more that should be done using the Magnitsky tools?
Well, certainly there are several thousand political prisoners in Russia today since the war began. In the first few months of the war, thousands of Russians took to the streets to protest this war. They were all brutally arrested. The entire Russian opposition, the ones that remained in Russia, that includes Vladimir Kara-Murza, Ilya Yashin, and others, they've all been detained. They are likely going to be in prison, as you mentioned, for 10 years, possibly more. We should be looking at those individuals, those Russian officials who ordered their arrests, those who arrested them from in the Kremlin all the way down to those officials who were involved in taking them putting them into jail. We should be looking at all those individuals and placing sanctions on them. So yes, there's a lot more that we can do with our Magnitsky legislation, which of course targets specific human rights abusers in regimes like those in Russia.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kolga. Mr. Chair, I believe that's my time.
Thank you, Ms. McPherson. We go now to the second round. I believe Mr. Jennis is first. Mr. Jennis, you have 4 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. This is really high quality testimony we're receiving from all three of you. And I would say that given your thoughtful and biting critique, I now find it no surprise that our Liberal chair made a last minute change to the agenda that limits the time we have with you, though it is unfortunate. Mr. Kolga, you mentioned the ability of committees to be able to nominate people for sanctions. I do just want to note for your information for the record that Bill C-281, tabled by my colleague Philip Lawrence, the International Human Rights Act, does contain some of those provisions, and we will be debating that bill in Parliament this fall, and hopefully it will be coming to us here at this committee soon. It's been reported recently as well by CBC that the value of frozen sanctions in Canada has dropped in recent months. This suggests the possibility that some people have been allowed to sell off assets. Do you have any reflections or information about how it is that the value of frozen assets under sanction would somehow be dropping?
Well, that's a very good question. I saw that same report. According to that report, by August 9th, initially, the RCMP had reported that $289 million worth of Russian assets had been frozen, and then they revised that number to $122.3 million. I'm not sure how. What would account for that sort of a drop? It could be that the shares in stocks. Certainly, there's one rather large steel company that is owned by a prominent Putin-linked oligarch, which has found itself in quite a bit of hot water since the war started. It's entirely possible that the value of that company, because of the sanctions, because of the war, has dropped, and it could be that other assets may have fallen in value because of that war as well. So it could be because of that. I'm not sure how to account for that.
Okay, something that maybe the committee should seek further information on. This question is for all the witnesses, and people can go in whatever order. The Canadian press reported recently that the government of Canada was considering the, quote, domestic economy, jobs, and inflation in making their decision on granting the sanctions waiver. The fact that they were considering domestic economic factors was a big surprise, given that it was discordant with the explanations previously given. We know that the government was lobbied recently by Siemens, though we don't know on which subjects. And it seems that the minister has waived sanctions on Russia, rejecting concerns raised by Ukraine, in part to protect the interests of a large company which operates fairly close to her riding. I wonder what kind of precedent is set when the government is saying that they are granting an exemption like this, not because of geopolitical factors, but because of domestic economic factors.
Thank you very much for this question, Chair. Philosophers call that a moral hazard. That is, it creates conditions under which your actions with a narrow definition of interest further down led to unintended consequences that actually harm both the your own interests, but as well as others. And like I said in my initial opening remarks, once you start carving out exemptions for domestic political reasons, everyone else start asking the same, and therefore you actually create a Swiss cheese of sanctions, and everyone start chopping from one part to another, and thus it undermines the sanctions. Sanctions work in the long term when they are united and they are consistently applied, and you're not going to be accused of hypocrisy when you're asking other countries, say in the global south, to sanction or to join the sanctions against Russia, but at the same time providing carve-outs for your domestic political or economic interests. So it significantly undermines credibility as well as the sanctions regime.
Thank you. Are there any other?
And if I may, I'd like to.
Mr. Jennings, I'm afraid you're way over time, so we're going to have to go to the next member. And the next member I have down is Mr. Zuberi. Mr. Zuberi, you have 4 minutes.
Thank you to all the witnesses for being here. I'd like to start off with Dr. Schmidt. In terms of weaponizing energy, you mentioned that Russia has been doing that for years, well before this current conflict in Ukraine. Could you share what other conflicts has Russia done this in? Was it done during the wars in Chechnya from 1994 to 96, 99 to 2000, or sorry, I should say 2009? In Georgia in 2008, or the war in the Donbass in 2017, Syria 2015? If you can comment on that, please.
Thanks so much. That's an excellent question. The bottom line is Russia has been weaponizing energy for many years, and this has a wide definition. First of all, there are the overt gas cuts that we can see that have happened dozens of times over the years. I can supply the committee with a list of everyone that I am aware of, but I know it's at least 20 or 30 long, these sort of instances. And this doesn't necessarily mirror military conflicts that the Russian Federation have been in, because the Russian Federation under Vladimir Putin has been in a hybrid war at the same time during all of, many of the conflicts that you mentioned, at least since at least the mid-2000s through now, with the West, and has been using energy in one way or another to either create market uncertainty and energy insecurity by actual energy cuts, or doing what I'm really concerned about as well, which is using energy as a means of strategic corruption, meaning to enact, energy deals and things like this, and then allow for elite capture around this. And we saw this in 2005 to 2006 when former German Chancellor Gerhard Schroeder stepped out of office and was, after being in office at the end of his tenure, supporting Nord Stream 1 and basically pushing that project forward, stepped out and was chairman of Nord Stream AG. We saw this go on with Nord Stream 2, things around Nord Stream 2. Former Austrian Econ Minister Hans-Jörg Schelling became Nord Stream 2 AG's senior advisor after stepping out of office. Former Austrian Foreign Minister Karen Kneißl stepped out of office. Of course, she was famously covered with in the press with having Putin at her wedding and dancing with Putin at her wedding. Stepped out of office after supporting Nord Stream 2 and others, pro-Russian policies while in office, and was appointed board member of Russian state-owned oil company Rosneft. Former French Prime Minister Francois Fillon was nominated to not one but two Russian state-owned oil and gas trading companies. So this really is a concern, and this is what I'm constantly calling for in the United States, which is to start this norm-setting process. The United States should pass an act called the Stop Helping America's Malign Enemies, or SHAME Act. When small case shame doesn't work, you need large case shame. And it doesn't have to be called that here in Canada, but Canada can join in this effort. There should be a Magnitsky-level anti-elite capture and anti-strategic corruption effort legislatively throughout global democracies to make sure that former officials cannot leave the public trust and then work for authoritarian state-owned enterprises. It shouldn't be controversial. This is something that this parliament can do today if it'd like to. At least put out a statement saying that it's the sense of parliament that this sort of practice can no longer happen, because it's still legal in too many jurisdictions.
So just to conclude, you said that in the conflicts I mentioned, that Russia has been using this same sort of approach of weaponizing energy.
Yes.
Thank you. I think my time's over. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Zuberi. We now go to Mr. Bergeron. Mr. Bergeron, you have 4 minutes.
I have 4 minutes. J'ai 4 minutes.
4 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. First off, the German ambassador, when she appeared before this committee, said that from our point of view, we would have lost significantly in the disinformation war if that turbine had not been able to be delivered. My question, Mr. Kolga, in your view, how could we have lost this war of disinformation or misinformation if it hadn't been delivered?
Well, that information war would have simply continued, and now that we have returned that turbine, we see it continue. The Russian government has continuously made excuses to stop, to reduce the flow of gas through Nord Stream 1, and now that it's stopped that flow completely, it is continuously blamed various different types of paperwork, insufficient repairs, and it is continuing to blame Canadian sanctions, not just for, again, it's energy warfare right now, but even the food crisis that it is causing. It is continuing to blame us. So, I'm not sure that that maintaining those sanctions would have made the information warfare any more intense, or whether it's reduced it. I think that Vladimir Putin will continue using disinformation to spread lies, to create conspiracies in order to undermine our geopolitical position, but also use these same issues, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, to try and destabilize and polarize Canadian society and societies in other Western democracies.
On voit que les sanctions.
We note that the sanctions are having negative effects on the economies of the countries that have chosen to put them in. So there is a bit of reaction that's happening. Some people are even hostile to the sanctions. Some politicians in Europe, specifically in France, are denouncing the sanctions and stating that they're not effective and that Russia has never enriched itself as much on gas as it has to support its war effort in Ukraine. Mr. Peskov's statement saying that they were going to cut off the supply, isn't that sort of countering those other statements and showing that the sanctions are having an effect on Russia's economy?
Well, yes, I think it demonstrates that Vladimir Putin is very much in a bit of a panic mode about the sanctions. Dr. Schmidt mentioned earlier that Russia is no longer able to repair any of its military equipment, that it's using parts from household appliances to patch up various different weapons. There have been reports that Aeroflot is cannibalizing its own aircrafts for parts in order to carry out repairs. A majority of Russians polled recently said that they are deeply concerned about the effect of sanctions. And a recently leaked Russian cabinet document report suggests that there is deep concern about brain drain caused by the sanctions. By 2025, it's estimated by the Russian government itself that 200,000 IT professionals are going to leave Russia, and that there will be an 8 to 11% contraction of the Russian economy within the next 24 months, and that it'll take a decade for Russia to recover its economy to pre-war levels. So sanctions are working. Sanctions aren't a silver bullet. They take time to work. It's like medicine, and they need to be sustained. Carving out exceptions for various different Russian entities doesn't work. We need to sustain them in order for them to work. And I think Vladimir Putin, with his reaction, Dmitry Peskov's reaction, demonstrate exactly that Western sanctions, when unified, are indeed working.
Thank you, Mr. Bergeron. We now go to Ms. McPherson. You have 2 minutes, Ms. McPherson.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I have 2 and Mr. Bergeron had 4.
Yes, that was an oversight on my part. I miscalculated insofar as Mr. Bergeron was concerned. My apologies for that.
If it would be all right with me if you miscalculated again, just a heads up. Thank you. I'll be very, very quick then. All of our witnesses today spoke, I believe, about the weaponization of energy, but also we have some deep concerns, of course, about the weaponization of food, the impacts that will have around the world, the weaponization of climate, the weaponization of nuclear power. I am somebody who's very deeply afraid of what we're seeing happening in the nuclear plant in Ukraine, deeply concerned what we're hearing from the UN observers that are there. And I'm wondering if I could just very quickly ask all 3 of our witnesses, perhaps Mr. Kolga, I'll start with you, on what Canada can be doing more to help with regards to the grain weaponization and with regards to, other aspects like the weaponization of nuclear.
Well, thank you for that very important question. You may not like this answer, but I think that we need to send more weapons to the Ukrainians, certainly Harpoon missiles, to deter Russian attacks on vessels leaving Odessa with that grain, the grain that is so desperately needed in so many parts of North Africa and Asia. Vladimir Putin stated very clearly again this morning that Ukraine is somehow reneging on its deal to export that grain, that the Western sanctions are preventing grain from being exported. This is nonsense. Ukrainian grain, those shipments are being made from Odessa, and we need to simply assume, quite frankly, that Vladimir Putin will renege on that deal. He may consider attacking some of those ships or causing some sort of problems. He's already attacked agricultural infrastructure in Odessa after signing that agreement. So that's one concern. As far as the nuclear blackmail is concerned, that he may be very well engaging in very soon, I think that we need to insist that those International Atomic Agency officials remain in Zaporizhia, that those numbers are increased to keep an eye on what's going on there, and to demand that they have access to areas of that plant where Russia has placed its weapons systems. So that's another thing that Canada could be doing immediately.
Thank you, Mr. Kolga. Would either of our guests from the chamber also be interested in answering that?
Thank you very much for this question. I think one of the other things that Canada can do and should do as a food superpower is to make sure that Canadian agricultural products get to the world markets. Maybe, given the distances and so on and so forth, it may not necessarily directly go to one of the most effective regions, but it can easily replace other grain that can actually go then to countries in North Africa, in the Middle East and Asia and elsewhere. And we need to be able to provide our farmers with the ability and the resources to rapidly and radically increase food production and getting those products to the world markets when we are clearly facing and will face food shortages.
Thank you. Mr. Schmidt?
I would say that Canada should continue to lead the charge on increasing sanctions. I will come back to energy and say that other areas that need to increase are ship-to-ship transfer technology sanctions. There's a significant amount of oil transfer that's going on several hundred miles off the coast of Portugal. That needs to end, basically through technology sanctions and on firms and insurers that are allowing for that to happen. And of course, coming back to what we're here about today, reversing the turbine waiver decision, right? I have pages of examples of officials, of experts, of Siemens itself pointing out that there is no technical rationale. There wasn't before the decision was made. There certainly isn't now. And I'll be submitting that to this parliamentary committee for the record. So this shows exactly that we need to have a technology-guided approach for our foreign policy decision-making, and that's why this decision needs to be reversed as quickly as possible.
Excellent place to end. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. McPherson. You'll be happy to know that your 2 minutes were stretched actually to over 4 minutes. So you're effectively in the same position as Mr. Bergeron. So we now next go. I've been receiving contradictory directions. I understand that we're going to Mr. Morrison or Mr. McLean. Mr. Morrison, will you be posing a question?
I think Mr. McLean will be having a question.
Thank you for that. Mr. McLean, please proceed. You have four.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I'm going to ask a question, first of all, Mr. Schmidt here. Mr. Schmidt, you talked about the energy delivery from Germany to Russia here, Russia to Germany here, but let's talk about funds flow, if you will. And the choking back of natural gas delivery. There's one pool of natural gas delivery to foreign entities in the world and just gets balanced back and forth. But the pricing of natural gas in Europe now is about 11 times higher than North American benchmark pricing. So Russia can afford to cut back summarily, its natural gas production, its supply to the world, and still benefit economically and use that money to continue the war machine. Any comment on what the algorithms they must be using in order to maximize their own funds flow here?
Well, I mean, I think that we have to look back at the broader sanctions regime on both oil and gas. When you look at gas in particular, one of the arguments are, well, just like oil, they could just sell this elsewhere, right? Well, no, gas is not fungible in the way globally, at least not yet. There is LNG that increases its fungibility, but it's not as fungible as oil. And so that's why what Mr. Kolga said is so important. This, again, another technical driver here that's showing proof of what's going on at Portovaya, which is gas flaring, where there's a significant amount of the resource that Russia would be sending through Nord Stream 1 that is instead just going up and being burned and creating all sorts of problems, not only only for the localized environment, but for the climate, especially in the Arctic region, where increasing the amount of soot that's going on to the Arctic tundra is changing the albedo of the surface of the Arctic region. That is only increasing the rate of climate change.
Exactly. If I can interrupt there, Mr. Schmidt, exactly the case, and the issue, of course, being that Canada at the same point in time not supplying its energy to the world because we've been constrained in production. 2 weeks ago, we were actually getting negative numbers for our natural gas in North American delivery versus what was being 11 times the U.S. benchmark received in Europe. Mr. Chair, I'm going to turn the rest of my time over to Mr. Genuis, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. McLean, and thank you to the witnesses again. Just to avoid further shenanigans and delays, I think it's important to move the following motion. My motion is that the committee meet in public within 7 days of the adoption of this motion for a discussion of committee business related to the Gazprom turbine study. Again, the motion is that the committee meet in public within 7 days of the adoption of this motion for a discussion of committee business related to the Gazprom turbine study. So that motion has been moved. The clerk has it in both official languages and can distribute it to members. In light of the fact that it's been a month since the committee met, in light of the last minute changes we've seen to the agenda, in light of some of the issues that we've had, I think it is important that the committee provide clear direction to the chair in the form of a discussion on committee business that programs our path forward. That is why I am moving this motion. It's very reasonable that we would, within 7 days, meet, do committee business, be able to define an agenda so that we don't have some of the things that have happened from the chair's office happening again, and so that we can establish some clarity going forward. So that's the motion. It's been distributed. Thank you very much.
If I could just clarify for the members, as is routinely the case with this specific committee, at the start of the parliamentary session, the subcommittee on agenda, which is comprised of members from all parties, actually do have the first meeting to provide the chair with direction as to where the committee would like to go. And that, of course, would have been the case in this specific instance as well. So just wanted to...
Point of order, Mr. Chair, just want to clarify, are you engaging in debate on my motion or?
No, I'm providing clarification.
Thank you for the clarification. I guess my motion can be debated now. Thank you.
It seems, Mr. Genuis, you're not familiar with the fundamentals of how this committee is run in the past. And
certainly how it's being run under you, Mr. Chair. Not familiar at all. Thank you.
So just thought I would share that for the benefit of all members. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to this? Mr. Sidhu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, you've got a very valid point there. I believe that ministers, relevant ambassadors have appeared before our committee and have made it clear that while it was a difficult decision, it was one that was necessary to take. And as our minister stated, they discussed the matter with all parties, including Ukraine, in advance of the decision being taken. And the decision was not only supported just by Germans, but by our allies in the European Union, our allies to the south, the United States, and in no way reduces our support for Ukraine and, of course, its people. I also find it very difficult to believe that had another party been in government and had been faced with a clear and urgent request from a close ally such as Germany, they would have decided any other way. But given the circumstances, it was a necessary decision, and I cannot support a motion that would suggest otherwise. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Would anyone else? Mr. As I see it, Mr. Bergeron.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. D'abord.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First off, I find it really quite surprising to see Mr. Sidhu repeating these government lines as though we had not had any hearings or as though we hadn't heard from witnesses, as though the committee had already made a decision as to its hearings. It's surprising. It's even concerning that on the one hand. Now, on the other hand, I feel that the motion Mr. Genis is putting forward seems absolutely reasonable to me and is in keeping with the discussions we've had with the chair to the effect that we should hold a sitting on future business where we would decide together as to whether it would be worthwhile to continue. But as members of the committee, we should give ourselves the opportunity to be able to have a discussion as to what we've heard. Have we heard enough to make any proposals to government, not just to repeat what the ministers have told us, as Mr. Sidhu just did, but also to really focus on what we heard, or whether we should go beyond and have further hearings. Mr. Genis, I feel that this proposal from Mr. Genis is absolutely reasonable, and I don't see why we wouldn't have the opportunity, as we have discussed, the vice chairs and the chair, that is. We did decide it would be good to meet, and I'm announcing that I would be voting in favor of this motion.
Thank you, Mr. Bergeron. Ms. McPherson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering whether or not it would be appropriate for us to let our guests leave while the committee has this discussion. It does seem that we did ask them to come, and their schedules, and we've made them sit through longer testimony than we had originally planned for. So perhaps that would be the next step, is to allow them to depart, and thank them very much for their testimony today.
I think that's a very prudent observation, Ms. McPherson. Allow me, on behalf of all of the members of this committee, thank...
Rappel au règlement, Monsieur le Président. Avant de remercier...
Point of order, Mr. Chair. Before we do that, does the Liberal Party not have a round? Unless our Liberal Party members... I would have appreciated an opportunity to ask my question. Yes, I think we should give the Liberal Party the opportunity to ask questions.
Just on the point of order, Mr. Chair, I would just suggest let's vote on the motion and then proceed to give the Liberals their round. I'm prepared to vote if others are.
Understood. The next person who'd like to speak to the motion is Mr. Zuberi.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So we've all heard the motion and we've gotten it. Thank you, Garnet, for that. With respect to next week, I'd like to just flag for everybody's attention that us as a Liberal Party, we actually have our caucus, a national caucus retreat, taking place next week. I don't know what the schedules are of other parties, but that's our schedule, which would make it hard for us to all to participate in a fulsome way. So that being said, I think that before we enter into the vote, we should all be considering the schedules of colleagues around the table, no matter what party they're from. I think that we'd all be doing that in order to move ahead on important business.
Thank you, Mr. Zuberi. Mr. Genis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If we can just allow this briefly, Samir, what days are your caucus event?
We are. Oh, I think there's a speaking order. So,
can I ask? Do you mind just saying the day, or that'll help us move this forward?
Yes, Mr. Zuberi, could you clarify that, please?
Sure. Next week till Wednesday, we'll be in meetings, and then people making their travel from there as of Wednesday. So Thursday will probably be taken up also.
Full day.
There is a speaking order.
Sorry, full day Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. You're in meetings,
Mr. Chair.
Okay,
I don't believe that
we're not full day Wednesday, but go ahead, please.
Okay, so we also have a caucus retreat. So I had the floor, so I'll just finish my comment. We also have a caucus retreat in the next 7 days. And I think it would be good for the chair and the clerk in scheduling this meeting to take into consideration potential conflicts with caucus retreats. However, a 7-day window is a pretty wide window. We could meet on Friday. We could meet, someone could propose an amendment to move it to 8 days or 9 days. But I'm really sick of the delays, right? We were sitting on our hands for a full month. And I think this motion is very reasonable. I think we should work around caucus schedules, but I somehow highly doubt that any caucus is meeting, solidly for the next 7 days from dawn till dusk. So I think we can probably find a window that works.
Madam Bendayan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And given that we just heard that amendments will be necessary to this motion, and that our witnesses are here, and that this is a matter that we would like to fully flesh out with the witnesses, I move to adjourn debate.
So this, as I understand it, that does adjourn the committee, actually.
No, it doesn't. It's a dilatory motion, and we go to a vote, Mr. Chair.
Oh, we go to sorry, my apologies.
Debate. Thank you.
Absolutely. Sorry, my apologies for that. Okay, Madam Clerk, we'll go to a vote on this.
Yes, Mr. Chair. So the vote will be on adjourning debate on the motion of Garnet Genius. So, Mrs. Bendayan.
Oui.
Mr. Long.
Yes.
Mr. Sidhu.
Yes.
Mr. Sarai.
Yes.
Mr. Zuberi.
Yes.
Mr. Chong.
No.
Mr. Generous.
No.
Mr. McLean.
Sorry, no.
Mr. Morrison. Mr. Morrison?
No.
Monsieur Bergeron.
Non.
Mrs. McPherson.
No.
So this is 5 yeas, 6 nays.
Now, as I understand it, do we revert back to the motion proposed by Mr. Janis?
That is correct.
Yes, Mr. Bergeron.
Oui, Monsieur le Président.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I think our colleague, Mr. Zubari, raised a valid point. We ourselves will be in a caucus meeting Wednesday and Thursday, if I recall. So I think we need to take into consideration these caucus meetings, and therefore I think an amendment would be in order. So I would suggest the following: that we add the terms in the coming days or in the next few days.
Thank you for that amendment, Mr. Bergeron. We now go to Mr. Zuberi.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, just a point of order. There's an amendment on the floor, but I don't quite understand the specific language of that amendment, and maybe it was there was a translation issue, but just what words are being removed, what words are being added. Could that be clarified?
Yes, if we could ask the clerk to provide us with the specific wording.
Bien sûr.
Of course. If Mr. Bergeron can correct me if I'm wrong, because it is his amendment. So this is it, that the committee would meet in the coming days following the adoption of the motion to discuss committee business relating to the export of the Gazprom Russian turbines. So there would be substituting the words in the 7 coming days to in the coming days. The interpreter does not have this document in front of her.
Thank you. Now we go to Mr. Zuberi.
Thank you. And I'd like to propose a sub amendment, or whatever the procedure says. Essentially, I do like the idea that Mr. Bergeron is mentioning. J'aime l'idée que Mr. Bergeron propose.
I like the idea Mr. Bergeron is putting forward, but I would like to have some clarification on the number of days.
Like pick up on the spirit of what Garnet is mentioning, and I would suggest within the next 14 days, given that next week will be taken up by caucus meetings of various parties. That'll allow us to do what the intent of Mr. Genes's motion is, which is within 7 working days that we actually have free. So that's what I would suggest.
So within 14 days is your sub amendment, Mr. Zver?
Yes.
Okay. Did I see Mr. Sidhu? Did you want to speak to this issue? No. Okay, I thought I saw a raised hand. So seeing that no one wants to speak to this, did we want to put this sub-amendment to a vote now? Madam Clerk, could you just for clarity's sake, could you kindly provide the language for the sub-amendment as well?
Sure. So the vote would be on a sub-amendment which reads as follows. So that the committee meet in public within the following 14 days of the adoption of this motion for discussion of committee business related to the study of the export of Russian Gazprom turbines. Thank you. So, Mrs. Bendayan.
Oui.
Mr. Long.
Yes.
Mr. Sidhu.
Yes.
Mr. Sarai.
Yes.
Mr. Zuberi.
Yes.
Mr. Chong.
Yes.
Mr. Generous.
Yes.
Mr. McLean.
Yes.
Mr. Morrison.
Yes.
Monsieur Bergeron.
Oui.
And Mrs. McPherson.
Yes.
So it's 11 yeas for the sub-amendment.
Mr. Chair, just a point of order, just to save time, I suspect you'd find unanimous consent to deem the amendment and the motion adopted, rather than us just going through the votes again.
Is everyone okay with that? Excellent. So the sub-amendment has been adopted, and so we will be meeting in the next 14 days. On that particular note, I think there's only one time slot left for questioning our witnesses who have been patiently waiting by. Ms. Bendayan, you have 4 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président, et merci énormément.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thanks as well to the witnesses. Apologies for having you wait here. I had a question, Dr. Schmidt, relating to what you were saying earlier. You mentioned the importance of unity as allies in the way we respond to Russia. To my mind, that's absolutely fundamental. I'd like to hear what you have to say, given the recent developments, specifically in Italy, for instance, politically, or also discussions that took place earlier this summer in Germany. Can you tell us a bit more about the importance of maintaining this unity that, of course, Putin is trying to undo at all costs? He's trying to divide NATO, the G7, the European Union. Can you tell us about how important it is to maintain Allied unity?
Sentez-vous bien à l'aise, Dr. Schmidt, de répondre en anglais?
Of course, feel comfortable answering in English.
Merci, Madame Bendayan. But that's all I'll do there. I think that your question is absolutely spot on, and it's incredibly important that we maintain unity. Obviously, as I said earlier, the success that Ukraine will have to win the war and restore full territorial integrity and sovereignty over its territory is paramount, that that global democracies stand united against Russian aggression, both in Ukraine, but also hybrid warfare, whether it's cyber attacks, whether it's disinformation, whether it's propaganda, whether it's energy weaponization, whether it's using space assets in ways that are concerning to global security. So what we have to do is make sure that sanctions are staying united, and that when we have these sort of situations where over the years Russia has basically built energy infrastructure and used it to split allies, we have to look at where was the unity on projects like Nord Stream 2. Over the years, all of NATO's eastern flank at one point or another opposed and called for this project to be stopped. The United States, both Democrats and Republicans, both administrations and on Capitol Hill, called for this project to be stopped. I visited, when I was in my role as European Energy Security Advisor at State, I visited Ottawa in 2018, and Global Affairs Canada also had come out opposed to Nord Stream 2. The United Kingdom, France at times has opposed Nord Stream 2, as had a number of countries throughout the Nordic region. Basically, the only countries that supported Nord Stream 2 were Germany, Austria, and of course, Russia. And so, again, when you have examples where the European Parliament, for example, on a nearly unanimous basis or at least extreme majorities on at least 3 occasions, called for this project to be stopped over the years, for that to continue to go forward, and for Germany to pressure the United States to suspend its sanctions, and then for Germany to then pressure Canada to suspend its sanctions, of course, a slightly different situation, but in this case on the Nord Stream 1 turbines. Those are the sort of actions that we need to avoid as global democracies. We need to continue to mount pressure as much as possible on the Putin regime so that democratic norms will be restored and sovereignty will be restored in Ukraine, and so that we'll become more resilient going forward to stand up to authoritarian aggression, whether it comes from Russia, China, or elsewhere. Merci.
I have only a few seconds left, Dr. Schmidt, but it's been reported that Russia acquired attack drones from Iran, and that now it's looking to buy artillery ammunition from North Korea. I wonder if you could just comment briefly with the time that we have left on what this might suggest. Is Russia running out of ammunition?
Yeah, this suggests that the technology-calibrated sanctions that have been put in place against dual-use technologies are working, that Russia is having to look to other authoritarian nations, Tehran and Pyongyang, among others, to backfill its military equipment. And so this is, again, why we need to continue to have this united approach to maintain, not have more and more waivers for sanctions, but maintain sanctions pressure and increasing sanctions on a daily, if not weekly, if not daily basis. This has to continue in order to make sure Ukraine succeeds.
Does it suggest to you that sanctions are working?
Yes, it absolutely does.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do I have any time left?
I'm afraid not, Ms. Ben-Dayan.
Thank you very much, Dr. Schmidt, and to all the witnesses.
So allow me to thank all of our 3 witnesses who have been incredibly gracious with their time, with their knowledge, with their expertise. We obviously started later than had originally been scheduled. We stayed on longer than anyone would have anticipated. So thank you very, very much. You have certainly provided each member of this committee with a lot of food for thought. Thank you for your time. Now, as I understand it, we're going to the budget. Is that correct, Madam Clerk?
You could do the budget, but you can also do them at the next meeting.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair, I move the adoption of the budget.
Okay.
Would it be
So
possible
is
to
this
clarify
unanimous
which
consent to
project?
that? So is there unanimous consent to that? Yeah. Excellent. So that has been adopted and that's off the table. So allow me to thank everyone and looking forward to seeing everyone very, very soon indeed. Okay, the meeting stands adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks.